She thought I'd never find out after 35 years together. Instead of confronting, I left quietly with divorce papers ready. When you spend 35 years with someone, you start to believe you know them better than anyone else in the world. You believe in the shared language built from decades of inside jokes, family rituals, and silent glances that say more than words ever could. I thought my wife and I were unshakable. We met in college in the late 80s. She was 20, I was 21, and back then, we were broke kids trying to figure out life. We married in 89, bought a starter home in 92, had our first child in 94, and built everything we have from the ground up. I worked in finance. She worked part-time as a teacher's aide while raising our two kids. We never had fancy cars or exotic vacations, but we had stability. We had each other. At least, I thought we did. Over the years, like most couples, the fire mellowed into a steady burn. Romance became routine. Our conversations shifted from dreams and plans to grocery lists and retirement savings. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. We raised two children who are now adults with lives of their own. We put one through law school, the other through med school. We paid off the mortgage. We survived recessions, job changes, health scares, and funerals. 35 years. That has to count for something, right? But in the last year or two, I noticed subtle shifts. It started small. Her phone, once left on the kitchen counter, was suddenly always face down. Notifications muted. If I walked into the room, she'd lock the screen almost instinctively. She laughed more at texts than at my jokes. I tried to ignore it. After so many years, you learn not to nitpick. I told myself, she's just more private now. Maybe she's got a group chat with friends. Then came the late nights. She had a book club that seemed to run longer and longer, sometimes until midnight. She claimed she was meeting a former colleague for dinner, yet she'd come home smelling of perfume she never wore around me. One night I asked, "Do you ever feel like we don't spend enough time together?" She smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "We've been together 35 years. We don't need to be glued at the hip." It stung, but I let it slide. The truth came not in a dramatic slip-up, but in a mundane moment. It was a Saturday morning. She was in the shower, and her iPad was sitting unlocked on the kitchen counter. I wasn't snooping, at least not at first. I just picked it up to check the news, like I sometimes did. But a notification popped up. A message preview. 3 words that changed everything. Last night, incredible. My chest tightened. Against every moral instinct, I opened the thread. What I found confirmed what my gut had been whispering for months. Dozens of messages. Weeks of exchanges. Pictures. Jokes. Compliments. Descriptions of things they'd done together. Things I hadn't shared with her in years. His name was Richard. Married. Mid-50s. Worked in her old school district. They weren't talking like two people just flirting. They were talking like lovers with their own universe, a place where I didn't exist. I sat there frozen, scrolling with a numb detachment. One part of me felt sick, another part coldly clinical. I screenshotted everything, sent it to a secure email I'd created years ago for backup documents. Then I set the iPad down exactly where I'd found it. When she came downstairs wrapped in a towel, humming to herself, I forced my face into neutrality. "Morning," I said, sliding the newspaper across the table. She kissed my cheek, none the wiser. That was the moment I realized the marriage I thought we had no longer existed. At least not for her. I spent the next week in a fog, alternating between heartbreak and fury. I'd lie awake at night replaying our history, wondering how long she'd been drifting away from me. I thought about our kids, about the decades of Christmas mornings, vacations, hospital visits, graduations, all of it now tainted. But somewhere in the haze, another feeling surfaced, clarity. I couldn't change what she'd done, but I could choose how I responded. Instead of confronting her in a blaze of shouting and tears, I made a different choice. I began to gather evidence. I checked bank statements, noting dinners and hotel charges she'd never mentioned. I set up a discreet consultation with a divorce attorney recommended by a friend. I started pulling documents, tax returns, retirement accounts, deeds, insurance policies. Every click of the printer, every file I slid into a folder, felt like reclaiming a piece of control. The irony wasn't lost on me. After 35 years of building a life together, I was now dismantling it brick by brick, paper by paper. She still kissed me goodnight, still made me coffee in the morning, still texted our kids in the family group chat like nothing was wrong. But for me, The spell was broken. One evening, I stood in the doorway watching her laugh at her phone. She looked so alive, so engaged, more than I'd seen her in years. And I realized she had given her vitality, her secrets, her passion to someone else. Not to me. Not to the man who had stood by her through decades of life's grind. I didn't say a word, but inside, something hardened. I knew I would never beg for her attention again. I knew I would never let her rewrite this story as a mistake or just a phase. And most of all, I knew that when the truth came to light, it wouldn't be me who looked like the fool. It would be her. The week after I discovered the messages was the longest of my life. Every smile from her, every casual, "How was work?" felt like a dagger. She had no idea I knew. She carried on with her routines, still humming when she cooked, still scrolling through her phone late at night while I pretended to sleep beside her. It would have been so easy to explode, to shove the iPad in her face and demand answers. But I didn't. Not because I didn't want to, but because I realized that if I let emotions drive me, I'd lose control. And control was the only thing I had left. Instead, I booked an appointment with a divorce attorney. Walking into that office was surreal. After 35 years of marriage, I never imagined I'd be sitting across from a stranger discussing how to divide the life I'd built with my wife. The attorney, a sharp woman in her 40s, listened carefully as I laid out the situation. She asked direct questions. Do you have proof of infidelity? Yes. Do you share assets? Yes. Do you want to pursue fault-based divorce or no fault? I told her I didn't want to humiliate myself in a courtroom battle, but I also didn't want her walking away unscathed after what she'd done. The attorney explained my options, outlining what evidence would hold up, what strategies made sense, and, most importantly, how to protect my retirement and investments. Her words cut through the fog. This wasn't about revenge. It was about preservation, about making sure I didn't lose even more after losing my marriage. I spent the next several nights methodically gathering. I pulled tax returns from the past decade, scanned mortgage documents, and downloaded every statement from our retirement accounts. I checked joint credit cards, noting unfamiliar charges at hotels, restaurants, and gas stations hours away. I printed everything and filed it neatly. Every time she kissed me goodnight, I thought of the folder hidden in my office drawer. Every time she laughed at her phone, I remembered the screenshots saved to my secure drive. She had no idea I was building a case right under her nose. There were moments when the weight of it nearly crushed me. Sitting in our living room, surrounded by framed photos of vacations and family milestones, I'd feel tears sting my eyes. How could she look me in the face and lie so easily? How could the woman I trusted with everything betray me in such a calculated way? But then I'd remember her words in those messages. The way she gushed over Richard, the way she compared him to me. Those words hardened me. They reminded me I wasn't crazy or overreacting. She had already made her choice, and so I made mine. I wouldn't be the angry, blindsided husband begging for explanations. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. When the time came, I'd be calm, precise, final. One evening, I sat across from her at dinner. She was chatting about our daughter's new apartment lease, stirring her pasta like nothing was wrong. I studied her face, the lines carved by decades of shared life. I thought of the girl I married, the woman who held my hand in delivery rooms, who cried with me at funerals, who laughed with me at graduations. And then I thought of the woman on the screen, sending explicit texts to another man, weaving a second life behind my back. It was as if I was looking at two people. The plan crystallized in my mind. I'd wait until everything was airtight. The divorce papers signed, the assets secured, the evidence compiled. Then I'd decide, confront her face to face, or disappear and let the documents speak for themselves. For weeks, I played the part of the oblivious husband. I asked about her book club. I offered to pick up groceries. I kissed her cheek when she left for her friend's dinner. Every gesture was calculated, a performance to buy time. Inside, I was already gone. I started preparing my exit quietly. I opened a separate bank account. I changed the password on my email. I located an apartment downtown, nothing fancy, just a furnished place where I could land when the dust settled. I also thought carefully about our children. They were both adults now, but the divorce would affect them deeply. I didn't want them caught in the middle. So I began drafting a letter, calm, factual, without venom, explaining why I was leaving. I would not burden them with the gory details, but I also wouldn't let her paint me as the villain. The hardest part was the waiting. She'd sit beside me on the couch, her head on my shoulder, scrolling through her phone. I knew she was texting him. Sometimes I'd glance over and catch a fleeting smile, the kind she hadn't given me in years. And yet, I stayed silent. I thought of confronting Richard instead. His wife deserved to know. His children, if he had any, deserved to know. The temptation to blow up his world was strong. But again, I pulled back. Timing mattered. Evidence mattered. One wrong move could jeopardize everything. So I waited. I planned. I gathered. And the more I prepared, the more a strange sense of empowerment grew. For the first time in months, I wasn't just a victim. I was in control. By the end of the second month, my folder was thick with documents. My lawyer had a full copy. The papers were ready to be filed at a moment's notice. All that remained was the choice: confrontation or silence. Do I look her in the eyes after 35 years and demand the truth she's been hiding? Do I let her see the pain she caused, give her one last chance to explain, or lie again? Or do I ghost her forever, file the papers, disappear to my new apartment, and let her lover's family receive the evidence in a neat envelope? Two paths, both final. Every morning when I woke up beside her, every night when I heard her phone buzz with messages from another man, the question echoed louder. Do I confront her or vanish? Update 1.b. By the time spring rolled around, everything was in place. My lawyer had the documents drafted and ready to file. The evidence folder was organized down to the last screenshot, with backup copies stored on a cloud drive she couldn't touch. The apartment lease downtown was signed. From the outside, though, nothing looked different. We still had our routines: coffee in the morning, chores on the weekend, Sunday dinners with our daughter when she came over. If anyone had walked into our home, they would have seen a long-married couple quietly moving through life together. But inside my head, it was a war zone. Every time she left for a book club, I imagined her laughing in someone else's car, holding someone else's hand. Every time she told me she loved me before bed, I heard the echo of her messages to Richard, the words she thought I'd never see. The calm exterior I kept was like glass stretched thin, and I could feel it vibrating, waiting for the crack. The truth was, I didn't need to confront her to get what I wanted. The legal path was already laid out. My lawyer even told me, if you can stomach it, disappearing quietly might be cleaner. Let the papers and the evidence do the talking. And yet, part of me wanted her to see me standing there when it all came crashing down. Part of me wanted to look her in the eye after 35 years and watch her face when she realized I knew everything. I'd rehearse it in my head at night. How I'd slide the folder across the table. How I'd say, in the calmest voice possible, I know. How I'd watch her scramble for excuses, her practiced lies colliding with the undeniable proof in front of her. But then I'd imagine another version. Me gone. Her waking up to an empty house, a letter on the kitchen counter, a lawyer's email in her inbox. Her reaching for her phone, calling me in panic, and me not answering. Both versions haunted me. One Friday evening, as she got ready for another dinner with friends, she put on perfume she hadn't worn in years. She looked good. Too good. She smiled in the mirror, practicing that little smirk I hadn't seen since we were young. And all I could think was, that smile isn't for me. I almost broke then. Almost told her everything. Almost let the rage spill out. But I didn't. I swallowed it and reminded myself, patience is power. That night, I sat at the kitchen table alone and read through the stack of papers again. Divorce petition, property division proposals, copies of joint accounts. It was all so dry, so clinical. Yet behind each document was 35 years of love, children, holidays, fights, reconciliations, aging side by side. I thought about our kids most of all. They were adults, yes, but how do you explain to your son or daughter that their mother, the woman they grew up watching bake cookies and plan Christmas mornings, had been lying to their father for years? How do you reveal that the foundation of their childhood home was cracked and hollow? I decided I wouldn't drag them through the mud. They'd know about the divorce, of course, but the affair? That was between me, her, and Richard. Unless she tried to twist the narrative, I'd keep the uglier truth contained. Still, I couldn't shake the thought of Richard's family. He was married too. Did his wife deserve to live in the dark while he played house with mine? I had his address, thanks to some creative searching. I had screenshots of messages that made everything crystal clear. I could send one anonymous envelope and blow his world apart. But then, was that justice? or just revenge? The line blurred in my mind until I couldn't tell anymore. One Saturday morning, while she was in the shower, I stood in our bedroom and stared at her phone on the nightstand. I knew the passcode. She never changed it. My hand hovered over it, temptation gnawing at me to dig further, to see just how deep the rabbit hole went. But I didn't. I didn't need more pain. I already had enough evidence. More wouldn't heal me. Instead, I walked out to the garage and sat in my car. I thought about driving off, right then, without a word. I thought about leaving her with only the silence of my absence. But I stayed, because as much as I fantasized about disappearing, I knew I wasn't running away. Not this time. I was choosing how to end this, not fleeing from it. And so, the choice sharpened into two clear edges. Do I hand her the papers face to face, calm and unshaken, letting her see exactly what she threw away? Or do I vanish and let her realize too late, with no chance to plead or lie? For weeks, I wavered. The lawyer was on standby. The apartment key burned a hole in my pocket. Every day felt like the edge of a cliff. And then one night, while she slept beside me, phone buzzing faintly with another late message, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, "It ends soon." I didn't know yet which path I'd take, but the countdown had started. Final update. The choice came to me not in some dramatic flash of clarity, but in the quiet, ordinary moment of standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing my coffee mug. The sunlight came through the window, catching the dust in the air. She was humming in the living room, scrolling her phone. And I thought, she doesn't deserve my words anymore. That was it. No confrontation, no shouting, no theatrical reveal. Just silence. The next morning, before she woke up, I slipped out of bed and left the letter on the kitchen counter. Inside, I wrote exactly what needed to be said. I know about the affair. The papers are filed. Please direct all communication through my attorney. The apartment is mine. The accounts are frozen. Do not contact me directly. I signed my name and nothing more. Then I picked up the suitcase I'd packed 2 nights earlier and drove to the apartment downtown. The drive was surreal. Every mile away from that house felt like peeling away a layer of my skin, painful but liberating. I didn't even look back at the street when I turned the corner. By noon, my lawyer had filed the divorce petition. By evening, she had called me 16 times. I didn't answer. She texted, begging for me to talk, alternating between denial and anger. What are you talking about? I don't know what you think you saw. Then, you're overreacting. It was just harmless fun. Then, please, let's talk. We can fix this. But I didn't reply. I meant what I wrote. No direct contact. 2 days later, my lawyer forwarded me a frantic email from hers. She wanted to negotiate, to understand the basis of the claims. My lawyer sent back the folder. Screenshots, call logs, hotel receipts, everything. After that, her side went quiet for a while. It was almost satisfying to imagine her face when she saw the evidence laid out like a crime scene. Not because I wanted her to hurt, but because she could no longer spin her stories. The truth was unmovable. And Richard? His wife got a copy too. Not from me directly, my lawyer handled it. I wanted clean hands. I don't know what happened in their house, but I do know his name stopped appearing on my wife's phone bill within the week. When I finally told our children, I kept it simple. We sat down in my apartment, and I told them their mother and I were divorcing. They were shocked, of course, and asked why. I told them there were things between us that couldn't be repaired. That was all. I didn't mention Richard. I didn't mention messages. But they're not fools. Kids, even grown ones, can read between lines. My daughter hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. My son asked, "Are you okay, Dad?" And I surprised myself by saying, "I think I will be." The first few weeks in the apartment were strange. The silence was heavy, the kind that pressed on your chest. After 35 years of another body in the bed, of noise in the kitchen, of someone else's perfume lingering in the closet, the emptiness was disorienting. But slowly, it became mine. I bought new dishes. I hung my own photos. I sat on the balcony with a book and realized no one was going to ask me where I was going, when I'd be back, or who I was with. Freedom feels like grief at first, but then it feels like air. Of course, the divorce itself wasn't painless. There were tense negotiations about property, about retirement accounts, about who would get what. She tried, at first, to minimize, to insist I was misinterpreting things. But with the evidence stacked so neatly, her lawyer eventually steered her towards settlement. We split what we had, and I walked away with less than half of what I once dreamed we'd retire on together. But I also walked away with my dignity intact. I never saw Richard again. I didn't care to. Whatever wreckage he left in his own family wasn't my burden to carry. What stayed with me, though, was the realization that 35 years can be rewritten in a moment, that a life built on trust can collapse with a few taps of a keyboard, and that the person you'd have sworn would never betray you is still only human, capable of choices you'll never understand. People keep asking me if I regret not confronting her face to face. If I regret not shouting, not demanding answers. The truth? No, I don't. Because confrontation would have been for her. A chance for her to justify, to cry, to make it about her emotions, her mistakes, her excuses. Walking away silently was for me. It was my closure, my boundary. It said, you don't get my words anymore. You don't get my time. You don't get my anger. You don't get me. And in the end, that was more powerful than any speech I could have given. It's been 6 months now. I'm not healed, not fully. Some mornings I still wake up expecting her beside me. Some nights I lie awake wondering when the rot really began, what moment I missed, what signs I ignored. But I'm also learning. I'm learning that being alone isn't the same as being lonely. I'm learning that silence can be peace, not punishment. I'm learning that after 35 years of giving, I can finally live for myself. As for her, I don't know. I don't check. I don't ask. Whatever story she tells about why our marriage ended is her burden to carry. Mine is lighter now. And maybe that's the strangest truth of all. The end of 35 years doesn't feel like death anymore. It feels like beginning.